A cop slammed a 13-year-old black boy to the ground, called him a liar, and threw him in jail. But seconds later, the President of the United States called the station, and everything changed. You won't believe who that boy was, and why the whole country stood still when he finally spoke. Keep watching. This story will break your heart and rebuild your faith in justice. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday. The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet town of Wakefield, Virginia, a place where sidewalks were always swept clean, and everyone knew everyone else's dog by name. School was out for spring break, and 13-year-old Jeremiah Carter had gotten up early, dressed himself in a button-down plaid shirt and pressed khakis, not because he had to, but because he believed in showing up with dignity, even if it was just to help at the community center. That morning, Jeremiah had packed a small notebook in his backpack, along with a half-used pack of colored pencils. He would been working on his speech, the one he was scheduled to deliver at the White House in just 3 weeks. The topic: justice through the eyes of a child. But justice was not what Jeremiah received that morning. As he walked along Elm Street, Jeremiah noticed a woman middle-aged, maybe in her 50s, stumbling near the sidewalk across the street. She looked disoriented. Her hands trembled as she reached for the wall of the corner gas station. Then she collapsed. Jeremiah did not hesitate. He sprinted across the street, heart pounding, dropping his bag beside her. "Madam, are you okay?" he asked, trying to gently shake her shoulder. She did not respond. Her skin was clammy. She was breathing, but barely. He pulled out his phone to call 911. That is when the sirens began wailing. A police cruiser turned sharply onto Elm, tires screeching against asphalt. The car came to a jolting halt just feet away. 2 officers jumped out, one younger, uncertain, maybe fresh out of the academy. The other, Sergeant David Dalton, 45. Buzz cut, pale skin, barrel chest, the kind of man who'd served in the Marines and never quite left the battlefield behind. His eyes locked on Jeremiah, a black kid kneeling beside a white woman with a phone in his hand. "Hands where I can see them," Dalton bellowed, gun halfway drawn. Jeremiah froze. I was helping her." She collapsed, dropped the phone. Dalton roared, already charging forward. Jeremiah placed the phone down slowly. "She needs help." Dalton shoved him to the pavement. Jeremiah's chin scraped the sidewalk. Blood filled his mouth. "Please, I did not do anything." Dalton twisted the boy's arms behind his back, locking them with cold steel cuffs. "You think you are smart, huh? Robbing an old woman in broad daylight. You got some nerve." "I was not robbing her. I called 911. Jeremiah shouted, his voice cracking in disbelief. But Dalton was not listening. People started to gather. A few recorded on their phones. Most just whispered. No one stepped forward. The younger officer knelt beside the woman, now unconscious, and checked her pulse. "She is diabetic," he murmured. "Medical bracelet. She probably fainted." Dalton ignored him. "Check the kid's bag. Bet he has got her wallet stashed in there." "No, sir, he did not," the younger cop began, but Dalton waved him off. Jeremiah's backpack was ripped open. Out tumbled a notebook, a White House invitation bearing the presidential seal, and a carefully folded speech titled, "Justice Through the Eyes of a Child." Dalton scoffed. "Nice forgery. You expect me to believe some street punk like you is going to the White House. I am not lying." Jeremiah screamed, tears flooding his face. "That is my name on it, look." Dalton did not bother reading it. "You are going downtown, son." The woman began to stir, moaning weakly. "The boy helped me," she whispered. Dalton stood up. "Madame, did he take anything from you?" She shook her head faintly. "No, he called for help." The crowd murmured louder now. One bystander, a woman in her 20s, stepped forward. "Officer, I saw it. The boy did not do anything wrong. He was helping her." "Madame," Dalton said coldly, "I do not take witness statements from Instagram influencers." "Step back." Jeremiah sat on the curb in cuffs, chest heaving. He had never been in trouble, never so much as talked back in school. Now he was bleeding, humiliated, accused of a crime he did not commit because of how he looked, where he stood, and what someone assumed. The ambulance arrived minutes later. The EMS confirmed the woman was in diabetic shock, and Jeremiah had likely saved her life. Still, Dalton refused to uncuff the boy. "Protocol," he muttered. "We will sort it out at the station." He yanked Jeremiah to his feet and shoved him into the back of the cruiser. As the car pulled away, Jeremiah pressed his forehead to the glass and whispered, "Why won't anyone believe me?" At the station, they took his shoelaces, his belt. No one let him call his mother. 2 hours passed. Then 4. Then 6. The boy who was supposed to speak to the president now sat alone in a cell, and across town, Carol Carter, a mother and a nurse, stood in her kitchen, staring at the clock, her hands trembling, wondering why her son had not come home. There are some children born into the world with a light so bright it burns through the darkest of rooms. Jeremiah Carter was one of them, born on a snowy December morning in Richmond, Virginia. Jeremiah came into the world quiet, too quiet. The nurses panicked at first, but when he finally cried, it was a strong, almost melodic sound, like a trumpet announcing a new day. From the very start, there was something in him that made people stop and listen. Carol Carter, his mother, was only 19 when she had him. She had dropped out of community college to work double shifts as a nurse assistant after Jeremiah's father, Marcus, had walked out, said he was not ready to be a father, and disappeared into the wind. Carol never chased him. Instead, she looked at her son, wrapped in a second-hand blanket at the city hospital, and whispered, "I will give you the world, baby boy, even if I have to build it myself." Jeremiah grew up in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a working-class neighborhood. The walls were thin, and the heater knocked loudly in the winter, but the home was filled with books, laughter, and a kind of love that made even the cracked kitchen tile seem golden. Carol never had much, but she gave Jeremiah everything: discipline, compassion, and a relentless belief in truth. By the time he was 7, Jeremiah was reading college-level history books, not because someone told him to, because he wanted to know where the world had gone wrong. He asked questions no adult knew how to answer. Why did people get treated differently for their skin? Why did Dr. King have to die? Why is fairness something we still have to fight for? At school, teachers marveled at his brilliance. He was the kind of student who sat quietly at the back, but aced every exam, wrote essays that made grown-ups cry, and always shared his lunch with anyone who forgot theirs. But Jeremiah was more than smart. He was kind, humble, and fiercely empathetic. He once gave his only winter jacket to a homeless man outside the library and walked home in the snow. Teeth chattering, never telling his mother until she found him with a fever. His principal, Ma Holbrook, once told Carol, "I have been in education for 30 years, and I have never seen a child like Jeremiah. He is not just a student, is a soul meant to move mountains." At 10, Jeremiah joined the Community Youth Council. At 11, he gave a speech at the state capitol about racial justice that went viral online. At 12, he won the national essay competition titled "The America I Want to Build." That win came with an invitation stamped and sealed from the White House itself to speak at the upcoming Youth Leadership Summit. Jeremiah did not scream or jump up and down when the envelope arrived. He just looked at his mom, tears brimming in his wide brown eyes, and said, "I guess someone finally listened." Every night since that letter came, he would been rehearsing, not just the speech, but every possible moment. What he would wear, how he would stand, how he would make the kids who felt small feel seen. He was not going to the White House for himself. He was going for all the Jeremiah Carters who had been silenced, doubted, ignored, and now he was in a holding cell, handcuffed, bleeding, no one believing a word he said. Sergeant Dalton, meanwhile, sat in the adjoining office, chewing on sunflower seeds, feet up on the desk, glancing occasionally at Jeremiah through the small square window. "Kid's got an attitude," he muttered to his colleague, thinking he is some kind of hero. His partner, Officer Rise, a Latino man in his 30s with a far gentler nature, studied the documents Jeremiah had carried. "This letter looks real, Sarge, and that is an official White House seal." Dalton grunted. "Forgers are good these days." He could be printed that at the library. Reyes shook his head. The invitation had a watermark, that kind of paper as federal issue, and the kid's record straight as no priors. Community volunteer. Look at this essay. It is powerful. Essay. Dalton laughed. "What is that going to prove?" Reyes looked again at the speech in front of him. The last line hit him hard. "Justice does not start in courts or Congress. It starts with believing children when they tell the truth." He looked up at Dalton. "We made a mistake, man." But Dalton was not ready to admit anything. His pride was thicker than the badge he wore. If the kids got connections, they will call. Until then, he sits back in the cell. Jeremiah curled into himself, his head resting against the wall. The sting from the pavement burn on his chin throbbed, but what hurt more was the silence. He thought of his mom, pacing the living room, of Pastor Green, who Dee always told him, "Speak truth, even if your voice shakes." His voice had not just shaken today, it had been erased. He whispered the opening of his speech to himself, trying to hold on. Injustice often wears a badge, a robe, or a polite smile, but real justice sounds like someone saying, "I believe you." Outside, the world was beginning to buzz. The video of Jeremiah being slammed to the pavement was already circulating online. The woman he helped had told paramedics what happened, and people were beginning to ask questions. Who was this boy? Why was he in handcuffs? And what kind of country did this to its brightest children? Back at home, Carol Carter finally got a call. It was not from the police station. It was from Washington, D.C. A deep, measured voice came through as, "Carter, this is President Elias Walker. I understand there has been an incident involving your son." Carol dropped the phone, because when the President of the United States calls about your child, something bigger than a misunderstanding has occurred. Sergeant David Dalton always believed in rules, his own rules. Long before he wore a badge, David was taught that authority was not given, it was earned, and once you had it, you did not let it go. Raised in a rigid, conservative household in rural Kentucky, his father, a former sheriff, would bark commands at the dinner table the same way he did on patrol. "People lie," he always said, "but uniforms do not." That belief shaped Dalton. It hardened him. And when he joined the Wakefield Police Department 15 years ago, it followed him into every traffic stop, every hallway, every split-second decision. To Dalton, a gut feeling was more trustworthy than any testimony, and suspicion was its own kind of evidence. So when he saw Jeremiah Carter, a young black teen, crouched beside a collapsed white woman, he did not see a good Samaritan. He saw a suspect. Now, sitting in the interrogation room as the clock ticked toward midnight, Dalton reviewed the footage from his bodycam. Arms folded, jaw clenched, he watched himself grab the boy, shove him down, cuff him, and heard Jeremiah's voice. Broken, pleading. "I called 911. Reyes sat across from him. "This does not look good, Sarge." Dalton did not respond. "We have got statements from the woman, says the kid saved her. Witnesses too. The nurse at the hospital said she owes her life to him." Dalton stared at the screen, and Reyes leaned forward. "We need to let him go. He should not have been brought in." Dalton's eyes narrowed. The kid refused a command. Didn't he drop the phone immediately? He reached, that is enough to escalate. He reached to call for help. Reyes said softly, "That is what the 911 log says." Call came in 2 minutes before we even arrived. From his number, Dalton stood abruptly. "I am not about to be painted as the villain here. I followed procedure." "Did you?" Reyes asked. "Or did you follow your gut?" Dalton turned sharply toward him, voice low and bitter. "You are new here. You do not know how things work. Out there, on the street, split-second decisions keep you alive. You wait to ask questions. You get shot." Reyes sighed, rubbing his temples. "He is 13. David, he is a child." But Dalton was not listening. He never really did. Down the hall, Jeremiah sat in the cell, legs curled under him, eyelids heavy with exhaustion. Every once in a while, he would jolt awake, afraid he would miss something, a chance to speak. A voice calling for him, his mother's footsteps. But the silence was suffocating. He remembered what his teacher Ms. Whitmore once told him after a class debate. The truth can always speak for itself. Jeremiah. Sometimes, it needs someone brave enough to shout it. He did not feel brave tonight. He felt small, powerless, forgotten, until the buzzer at the precinct's front desk rang. It rang again, and again, and then came the voice. "This is President Elias Walker. I am requesting immediate contact with the Wakefield Police Department regarding a detained minor by the name of Jeremiah Carter." The desk sergeant, barely 24 and sipping gas station coffee, dropped his cup in shock. I am sorry. Who? The voice remained calm. "The President of the United States. I am patched through by the Secret Service. Put me through to your commanding officer." Everything moved quickly after that. The captain of the precinct, a portly man named Bennett, stormed out of his office. Half awake, shirt untucked, eyes wide with panic. "Where's Dalton?" In interrogation B. "Sir," an officer stammered. Bennett burst in, slamming the door. "Dalton, pick up line 1. Now." Dalton glanced at the phone blinking on the wall. "Why?" "Because the freaking White House is on the line." Dalton stared at him, dumbfounded. "You are kidding. I wish I was." Bennett snapped. "You have got a call from the Oval Office. You better pray to God there is a good explanation for this." Dalton picked up the receiver with shaking fingers. "This is Sergeant Dalton." The voice that answered was smooth, firm, and unmistakably presidential. "Sergeant, this is President Walker. I understand you are holding a young man named Jeremiah Carter." Dalton cleared his throat. "Yes, sir. We had an incident." Standard procedure. "I did not know." "Didn't know what?" The president interrupted. "That he is a 13-year-old child who just saved a woman's life. That he has been invited to speak at my house next month. That he is the godson of my former chief of staff." Dalton's lips parted, but no words came out. "I read that boy's essay." The president continued. "It moved my entire cabinet to tears. And now he is bleeding in a cell because someone mistook his skin for a threat." Dalton's hand trembled. "Sir, I was following protocol. You followed prejudice." "Sergeant." "Not protocol." The line went dead. Dalton stood frozen. Rees spoke from the corner. "What now?" Dalton did not answer. He just walked out of the room, slowly, toward the holding cells. When he reached Jeremiah's door, he paused. Through the window, he saw the boy curled up, still trembling, still trying to hold himself together. Dalton unlocked the door. Jeremiah did not move. The older man stepped in, removing his cap. "Jeremiah, you are free to go." The boy looked up, confused. "What?" "I got a call. You are free." "I am sorry." But the word sorry fell from Dalton's lips like a stone in water cold, heavy, and barely making a ripple. Jeremiah stood slowly, wobbling slightly. His eyes met Dalton's. "I told the truth. The boy whispered. Dalton nodded once. "I know." And for the first time in his career, Sergeant David Dalton realized, the badge on your chest means nothing if the truth you wear behind it is broken. Outside, Carol Carter was waiting. As Jeremiah stepped into her arms, the dam inside him finally burst. He cried not from pain, not from fear, but from the weight of everything he would held inside. She held him tight and whispered, "You still have your speech, baby." He nodded against her shoulder. "Then we still have a reason to fight." Because now, the whole country was watching. And Jeremiah's voice, the one they tried to silence, was about to be heard louder than ever before. The video hit the internet before Jeremiah even got home. A grainy, shaky clip, filmed from across the street by a college student who happened to be pumping gas that morning. It started mid-shout, capturing Sergeant Dalton's voice barking, "Drop the phone," followed by the blur of a 13-year-old boy being thrown to the ground, the sound of a pained cry, the sharp, metallic click of handcuffs, the shocked gasps of bystanders. And then, Jeremiah's trembling voice. "I was calling for help." That 5-minute clip would break America's heart before dinner. By nightfall, it was on every platform: Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, even the front page of Reddit. The hashtag #BelieveItJeremiah trended within hours. Activists reposted the clip with rage. Lawyers reposted it with disgust. And parents reposted it with fear, whispering to themselves, "That could have been my child." But Jeremiah, he was silent. At home, he sat on the edge of his bed, still wearing the same bloody khakis and wrinkled plaid shirt from that morning. His mom had tried to get him to eat, to rest, to even smile, but Jeremiah was somewhere far away, floating in a space between humiliation and confusion. He had always believed in justice. He had believed in it enough to write about it, to speak on it, to defend it in classrooms and church basements. But he never expected to be at the center of it, not like this, not as a symbol, not as a wound gone viral. Down the hall, Carol Carter paced the living room, phone to her ear, juggling reporters, lawyers, and White House aides. One call in particular had changed everything. It was from President Walker as personal secretary, who had made one thing absolutely clear: the president would still like Jeremiah to deliver his speech in person. As planned, Carol was not sure how to feel. How do you send your freshly bruised by a system that is supposed to protect him back into the spotlight that had burned him in the first place? She walked to his room and knocked softly. "Baby, can I come in?" Jeremiah did not respond, but she opened the door anyway. He sat there, back straight, eyes locked on the crumpled speech still resting on his desk. He had not touched it since the arrest. Carol sat beside him, her voice gentle. "You do not have to go if you do not want to." Not anymore. He did not look at her. "Everyone's watching." "I know," she said. "They are not watching because of my words. They are watching because I was thrown down like I was nothing." She reached for his hand. He pulled away. "What if I freeze up? What if I cry?" She smiled softly. "Then they will see the truth. And that is why your words matter." Jeremiah finally turned toward her. "They called me a liar, Mom, And nobody stood up for me, not at first. What if I get up there, and the world still does not care? She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. Then we make them care. Across the country. The fire had already started. News outlets scrambled for interviews. Legal experts debated the arrest. Civil rights attorneys offered pro bono representation. But one person in particular was watching with far more than curiosity: a young woman named Alana Moore, a 27-year-old White House speechwriter who had originally selected Jeremiah's essay from a pile of over 12,000 submissions. She remembered reading it at her desk late one night. Coffee cold. Eyes aching. Jeremiah's words had stopped her in her tracks. Sometimes justice does not need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs someone to believe the kid who says, "I did not do it." Alana had cried then. Now, she cried again. She pulled up the viral video and watched the clip play for the 50th time. Jaw tight. Heart hammering. Then she dialed a number. She rarely used the direct line to President Walker. "Sir," she said when he answered, "we need to do more than invite him to speak." "I agree," the president replied. "Draft something bold. Something real." Meanwhile, at Wakefield Middle School, Principal Holbrook was losing sleep. He had known Jeremiah since he was 6, had watched him grow from a shy, stuttering boy to a young man who could silence an auditorium with a sentence. Now, parents were calling the school, furious that a student like Jeremiah had been treated like a criminal. Protesters were standing outside the precinct, and worst of all, not a single word had come from Sergeant Dalton, no explanation. No accountability, just silence behind a thick blue line. The community was fracturing, and at the center of it stood a 13-year-old boy who had never asked to be a martyr. The next morning, Jeremiah returned to school. He did not want to, but Carol insisted. "Let them see you," she would said. "Let them know you are still standing." He walked through the halls with his head down. Some students stared. Others avoided eye contact. A few whispered, "That is him." But then, as he passed the cafeteria, he saw something that stopped him cold. On the wall, in giant marker letters, was a banner that read, "We believe Jeremiah." Below it, dozens of handwritten notes from classmates. "You are brave. We are proud of you. Speak for us." His legs wobbled, his eyes blurred. And suddenly, for the first time in 2 days, Jeremiah Carter smiled. Later that afternoon, a delivery arrived at the Carter household, a large, white envelope bearing the seal of the White House and a handwritten note from President Walker himself. "Jeremiah, you wrote that justice needs someone to listen. I am listening. The country is listening. Let us make sure they never stop." Inside was an official plane ticket and a new time slot for his speech. Prime time. Live, not just before the youth summit, but before the entire nation. Because sometimes injustice writes the script you never planned. And sometimes the world turns its ears toward the voice it tried to silence. Carol Carter had always been a quiet woman, not weak, just silent. The kind of silence forged by working 2 jobs and raising a black son alone in a country that whispered, then shouted, that he might not make it to adulthood if she made a single mistake. Her strength did not come from loud protests or fiery speeches. It came from midnight prayers and whispered lullabies over unpaid bills. From holding her child tight every night and teaching him that dignity was not something anyone could give or take, it was something he had to carry for himself. But today, her silence had cracked. Carol sat on the worn-out couch of New Hope Baptist Church, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Across from her, pacing like a lion in a cage, was Reverend Isaiah Green, 63. Deep-voiced, sharp-eyed, a man who had marched with his father in Alabama and never once let injustice pass without thunder. "I told you, Carol," he growled, voice trembling with rage. "I told you the world would try to break that boy." Carol's voice was barely above a whisper. "They did not break him." Reverend Green stopped pacing. His eyes softened. "No, they did not. But they tried. And the whole damn country saw it." He turned toward the small sanctuary window. Outside, reporters clustered like vultures around the church gate. Inside, the choir had stopped rehearsing. Nobody wanted to sing today. The air was too heavy. The world had changed. Reverend Green walked back and sat beside her. "They need to see you. Hear you." Carol shook her head. "They do not want to hear from me. I am just his mother." "No," he said firmly. "You are the reason he is who he is." Carol looked down at her hands. "What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse?" The Reverend leaned forward. "You did not raise Jeremiah to cower. You raised him to stand. And if he is going to speak at the White House, then his mama better stand tall too." She looked up slowly, eyes wet but clear. "What would I even say?" He smiled. "You will know." That afternoon, Carol Carter stood on the church steps, a sea of microphones before her. Cameras flashing. Reporters shouting. She wore no makeup. Her scrubs from the hospital still bore a coffee stain. But she stood with the quiet power of a woman who had carried the weight of the world and refused to bend. She did not raise her voice. She did not shout. She simply said, "My son is not a symbol. He is not a headline. He is not a soundbite you pass around the internet for likes and tears. Jeremiah is a child. A boy. My boy. And 2 days ago, he did something brave. He tried to help someone, and for that, he was thrown to the ground and called a liar." She paused, breath trembling. "When I first held him in my arms, I promised I would protect him. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, prayed hard enough, loved strong enough, maybe he would be safe. But love is not enough. Is it?" The crowd was still. Carol's voice broke, just a little. "You see, black mothers in this country, we do not raise our sons like everyone else. We raise them like they are already running out of time. We teach them how to survive a traffic stop before they learn how to parallel park. We pray they make it home from school more than we pray for scholarships." She looked up then, straight into the cameras. "But my son made it home. And now he is going to speak not just for himself, but for every child who has ever been doubted, disrespected, dismissed." Reporters tried to shout questions, but Carol turned and walked away, leaving a silence so loud it echoed across networks. Back inside, Reverend Green nodded slowly, pride rising in his chest. "That," he said to no one in particular, "is how you shake a nation. But the Reverend was not done yet. That night, in front of a packed congregation, he climbed the pulpit, Bible in one hand and fury in the other. "This is not just about a boy," he thundered. "This is about the truth. This is about what happens when power is left unchecked and children are left unprotected. This is about a badge that acted before it listened, and a world that clapped when that badge said case closed." The congregation shouted back amen. Mothers cried. Fathers clenched fists. Children leaned closer, wide-eyed. He pointed to a large projector screen behind him. It displayed Jeremiah's speech in big, bold letters. "Next week," Reverend Green declared, "that boy will stand in the White House and speak truth to the highest office in this land. But we must stand first. We must remind this country that every Jeremiah deserves to be believed before he bleeds." Applause erupted. Outside, across the nation, more churches began organizing. Protesters carried signs with Jeremiah's words. Black families sat their sons down and said, "Watch, learn, speak." And somewhere in a cramped police station, Sergeant David Dalton watched it all unfold from a flickering TV. He turned the volume down. He did not speak. But the weight in his chest would not go away, because when the silence breaks and truth rises, even the ones who cause the pain must listen. The precinct was unusually quiet that morning. No phones ringing, no radio chatter, no banter between officers over coffee. Just an eerie silence that crept down the halls like fog after a storm. Everyone knew why. The walls of Wakefield Police Department had never felt so thin, and Sergeant David Dalton had never felt so exposed. He sat alone in the squad room, a black coffee untouched on his desk, the steam long gone. The television in the corner played the morning news on mute. The headlines rolled across the bottom of the screen in bold white letters. "Wakefield boy speaks out after wrongful arrest, president responds." Dalton's eyes lingered on the screen, watching the looped footage of himself pinning Jeremiah Carter to the ground. He winced every time the boy's voice cracked. "I was helping her. I called for help." It haunted him now, looping in his head like a siren he could not shut off. He had heard his share of criticism before complaints filed, protests outside City Hall, even the occasional angry email. But this was national. Presidential. This was not just another incident. This was a reckoning, and he was the face of it. Then the call came. It did not come through dispatch. It did not come through the captain's line. It came straight to Dalton's personal cell phone, a number he did not recognize. Unmarked. Secure. He let it ring twice, then 3 times. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. Something told him not to. He answered. "Sergeant Dalton," he said flatly. There was a pause, then a click. "Sergeant Dalton," said the voice on the other end, clear. Controlled and unmistakably powerful, this is President Elias Walker. Dalton shot to his feet, as if gravity had failed him. "Sir," he stammered, I did not expect." "You did not expect the boy you tackled to be someone worth protecting." The president interrupted. "No, sir. I mean, yes, I followed procedure. I did not know who he was. I do not care who you thought he was." The president snapped. "You saw a young black boy with a phone in his hand, and a white woman on the ground, and your first instinct was violence. Dalton gripped the edge of his desk. You did not ask. You did not wait. You did not listen. You just acted. And now a child who should have been preparing to speak on justice is now preparing to heal from your injustice. Dalton's mouth was dry. President, I deeply regret. No. Walker said, his voice turning icy. You do not get to hide behind regret, not this time. You humiliated a child who saved a woman's life. And then you handcuffed him like a criminal. There are cameras in that room. Sergeant. Audio logs. Witness statements. And now the eyes of the nation. Dalton's jaw clenched. What would you have me do, sir? You are going to resign, the president said without hesitation. You are going to issue a public apology. On camera, with his mother present, and you are going to mean every damn word. Because if you do not, I will personally make sure that your badge is the last one you ever wear in this country. Dalton was silent. Do you understand me? Sergeant Dalton. Yes, sir. The line went dead. He stood there for a long moment. Breathing hard, phone still in hand. Then, slowly, as if his body weighed more than it used to, he sat down. Later that afternoon, a press conference was called. Reporters flooded the Wakefield Community Hall. News trucks lined the street. Everyone knew something was coming, but no one expected him to walk out first. Sergeant David Dalton stepped up to the podium in full uniform, though his face looked 10 years older than it had the week before. The cameras clicked. The crowd murmured. He cleared his throat. My name is Sergeant David Dalton. He began, voice tight. And I am here today not as an officer of the law, but as a man who made a terrible mistake. He looked out at the crowd. Carol Carter stood near the front, arms folded. Jeremiah stood beside her. Expression. Unreadable. I misjudged a young boy. I let my bias speak louder than reason. I saw what I expected to see, not what was real, and I harmed a child who did nothing but try to help someone in need. He paused. I am resigning effective immediately, and I offer no excuse for what I did, only an apology. To Jeremiah Carter, to his family, and to every child who saw what I did and felt smaller because of it. He turned then not to the cameras, but to Jeremiah directly. I am sorry, son. I did not listen when I should have, and I hope someday, if not today, you can forgive me. The room was quiet. All eyes shifted to Jeremiah, who stepped forward slowly. He said nothing at first. Then, I do not forgive you because you were told to apologize. He said, voice steady, I forgive you because I want to carry your mistake with me forever. That is your burden now. Gasps echoed through the hall. Jeremiah turned and walked off the stage. The press chased after him, but he did not stop. He had a speech to finish, and a country to face, because forgiveness was not weakness. It was power. And he had plenty of that now. The first time President Elias Walker met Jeremiah Carter, Jeremiah was only 4 years old. It was not in the Oval Office. It was not on a podium. It was not anything the cameras ever caught. It was in the back hallway of a cramped community center on the south side of Richmond, Virginia. Elias Walker, then a young senator with tired eyes and scuffed shoes, had stopped by to meet with local nurses fighting for hazard pay. One of those nurses was Carol Carter. She had not planned to bring Jeremiah that day, but the babysitter had canceled. So she sat in the back row with her little boy curled in her lap, chewing on a blue crayon, his head resting on her chest. After the meeting, as the room emptied, Elias noticed the pair still seated. He walked over, smiled, and said, "You have got yourself a future senator there." Carol laughed nervously. "Oh no, sir. He is just a handful." But little Jeremiah had looked up, crayon smeared on his cheeks, and said, "I want to help people. Like you." Elias Walker knelt down to eye level. "You know how you help people." Jeremiah nodded seriously. "You listen." The senator blinked. He never forgot that moment. Over the years, Walker stayed in touch with Carol. Quietly. No cameras. No speeches. He helped get her transferred to a better paying hospital. He sent books for Jeremiah every Christmas, and when he won the presidency, there was one name he remembered as they launched the National Youth Speech Initiative. Jeremiah Carter. But none of this had ever been public, not until now. 3 days before the national broadcast, where Jeremiah was scheduled to speak, President Walker sat alone in the Roosevelt Room, a single photo in his hand, the one taken by a staffer all those years ago. It was a blurry shot, but clear enough to see. A young black boy staring up at him, with crayon on his cheeks and hope in his eyes. Walker knew the nation was waiting for a speech, but he was not going to give them just any speech. He was going to tell them the truth. The evening of the broadcast arrived. The White House lawn had been transformed into a stage of lights, flags, and hope. Families of all backgrounds filled the seats. Celebrities, leaders, and students from across the country had gathered, but no one received louder cheers when they arrived than the Carters. Carol stepped onto the carpet in a navy blue dress borrowed from a neighbor. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Jeremiah wore a simple suit gray jacket, navy tie, and carried his speech folded neatly in his inner pocket. But this time, it was not the suit that made him look older. It was the fire in his eyes. President Walker opened the ceremony. He stood at the podium, solemn, his usual polish replaced by raw, restrained emotion. "Tonight, we gather not just to hear from the next generation," he began, "but to listen, because in the past few days, a child reminded us what truth sounds like." The crowd fell silent. Walker paused, then continued. "Before we bring him up, I have something personal to share, something the public does not know." People leaned forward. "Years ago, I met a nurse in Richmond. She brought her little boy to a meeting about wages and long shifts. He was no more than 4, but he looked me dead in the eyes and said something that has followed me for the rest of my life. You help people by listening." The room was still. That boy was Jeremiah Carter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I watched him grow from a distance. I read every essay he submitted. I followed his victories, his kindness, his brilliance. But I also watched with heartbreak as this country almost broke him. He looked down. Steadying himself, We owe Jeremiah more than applause tonight. We owe him accountability. We owe him change. And we owe every child who looks like him the right to grow up without fear. He stepped back. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremiah Carter. The applause was thunderous. Jeremiah walked up slowly, the lights bright, the cameras rolling. His heart thudded so loud it drowned out everything else. But then he saw his mother, then Reverend Green, then Principal Holbrook. He saw every face that had believed in him when the world did not. He unfolded his speech, but he did not read it. He looked up and began to speak from the heart. My name is Jeremiah Carter. I am 13. I like drawing comics, eating cereal at midnight, and reading about people who changed the world. And last week, I thought maybe I could be one of those people. He paused. Then a man with a badge threw me to the ground and called me a liar. The room held its breath. I did not know if I would ever stand up again. Not just physically, but here. He said, placing a hand over his chest. I did not know if the country I loved would still love me back. Murmurs, tears. A father in the front row held his son tighter. But then something happened. You started listening. He turned to look at the president. You listened. He turned back to the crowd. And I learned something. Justice is not about punishment. It is about protection. It is not about who yells loudest. It is about who has the courage to say, I believe you, even when it is inconvenient. Applause started again, this time softer. More reverent. I forgive what happened to me. Jeremiah said, but I forget. I will use it to fight for kids who do not have cameras, who do not have hashtags, who are still waiting for someone to believe them. He stepped back from the mic, then added one final line. My name is Jeremiah Carter. I told the truth, and now the truth is telling me what to do next. The crowd rose to its feet. The roar of applause was deafening. The world had just met its next leader, and he was not wearing a suit or holding office. He was 13. Black. Brilliant. And finally, heard. By the next morning, Jeremiah Carter's name was everywhere, not just trending immortalized. News anchors called his speech the voice of a generation. Pundits, celebrities, civil rights leaders, even athletes quoted his words on every platform. Late-night hosts replayed his final line. I told the truth, and now the truth is telling me what to do next. Like it was scripture. But what struck people the most was not just the power of Jeremiah's words, it was how he had delivered them. No shouting. No vengeance. Just grace. Grace wrapped in pain. Strength, and the clarity of a boy who should have been broken but refused to bend. But in a different corner of the country, another name was spreading for all the wrong reasons. David Dalton. Overnight, he went from respected sergeant to symbol of systemic failure. Former colleagues distanced themselves. The police union released a carefully worded statement that offered support for all officers, but did not name him directly. Talk shows ran segments titled When Baez Wears a Badge. People dug into his record. Several traffic stops he would conducted over the years were now under review. He had become what no officer ever wants to be. Undeniable evidence. Still, Dalton refused interviews. He had not left his home in days. He kept his curtains drawn, his phone on silent, and his uniform folded in the back of his closet, like a relic of someone else's life. Shame clung to him like the scent of smoke after a fire thick. Stubborn and impossible to ignore. Then came the letter. It was hand-delivered by a Secret Service agent. Dalton opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a formal invitation. The White House, a televised town hall on justice, bias, and policing in America. Panel speakers. Legal scholars, civil rights activists, the President and Jeremiah Carter. At the bottom, scribbled in pen, "You said you wanted to make it right. Show up, Iwa." He stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he put on the same uniform that had once given him power. But this time, it felt heavier than armor. The town hall was set in the White House East Room. But it might as well have been a courtroom. Every major network broadcasted it live. Viewers at home watched with bated breath. Popcorn untouched. Drinks forgotten. Everyone wanted the same thing. An answer. President Walker opened with a brief statement about transparency and accountability. Then he turned to the panelists. Jeremiah was seated front and center, calm, composed, hands folded in his lap. Beside him sat Reverend Green. Further down, civil rights attorney Linda Covington. On the opposite end sat Dalton, stiff, pale, lips pressed into a line. His hands trembled slightly under the table. A moderator took the stage. "Tonight," she said, "we are not here for spectacle. We are here for honesty." Then, turning to Dalton, she asked the question the entire country had been waiting to hear. "Sergeant Dalton, why did you assume Jeremiah Carter was lying?" Dalton did not flinch, not this time. He took a breath, then said, "Because I stopped seeing him as a child." Gasps rippled through the room. "I did not see his notebook, his name tag, his heart." He continued, "I saw his skin. I saw a narrative I would written in my own head, a narrative I did not even know was there until I played back my own bodycam footage and did not recognize the man I had become." He looked directly at Jeremiah. "I let fear speak louder than reason. I let power silence compassion. I did not ask questions. I made assumptions. And I hurt someone who should have been protected, not punished." Jeremiah's eyes did not blink. Dalton continued, "There is no apology that can undo the trauma. But if you will have it, I offer mine." He stood, removed his badge, walked to the center of the room, and handed it to Jeremiah. "I am not fit to wear this, but maybe this time I can listen." The room was still. A camera zoomed in. Jeremiah looked at the badge in his hand, then slowly stood up and said, "Thank you," not because Dalton deserved it, but because the country needed to see what accountability looked like. The moderator cleared her throat. "Jeremiah," she asked, "after all that has happened, what is next?" He smiled faintly. "I go back to school. I finish my speech. I live my life." Then he paused. "But I want to stop speaking. Not for me, for the kids who do not get microphones, who do not get calls from presidents, who only get one shot to be believed, and too often never are. The audience erupted in applause. Even Dalton clapped, not because he had earned redemption, but because he had seen it for the first time, and he knew he would spend the rest of his life proving he was worthy of witnessing it. Backstage, Carol Carter wept quietly into her hands, not because her son had been vindicated, but because the world had finally seen what she had known all along. Jeremiah was not just her boy. He was everybody's reminder that the truth will rise, even if it starts on the sidewalk. The night of the speech arrived with a strange kind of silence, one that hung in the air not like fear, but anticipation, the kind of quiet just before a storm breaks, or when an orchestra lifts their bows before the first note. America was listening. Inside the East Room of the White House, a space usually reserved for state dinners and diplomatic receptions, rows of seats had been filled not with political elites, but with children. Children from every corner of the country, black, white, Asian, Latino, indigenous children in school uniforms, church clothes, and wheelchairs, children who had written essays just like Jeremiah once did. Some had never left their hometowns until this very trip. But tonight, they would hear their voices echoed in the story of a boy who had refused to stay silent. Behind the curtains, Jeremiah stood alone. No teleprompter, no suit jacket. Just him, a slightly wrinkled white dress shirt, a loosely knotted tie, and the small folded paper in his hand. But he would not be reading it, not this time. He had not planned to throw away the speech he spent weeks writing. He just felt something shift inside after the town hall. He realized the words on paper could never fully carry the weight of what he would lived. A staffer poked their head through the curtain. 30 seconds. Jeremiah. He nodded, then closed his eyes. He did not pray for strength. He already had it. He just reminded himself, tell the truth, even if your voice shakes. The announcer's voice echoed into the room. Ladies and gentlemen. Jeremiah Carter. Applause erupted, not polite, not restrained, but thunderous. Jeremiah walked to the podium slowly, deliberately. As he looked out at the sea of young faces, he did not see strangers. He saw pieces of himself, every version of who he might have been if things had gone differently. He leaned toward the mic, then spoke. I want to tell you a story. He began. It starts, like a lot of stories in America, with someone not being believed. He paused. The room stilled. I was walking to volunteer at a community center. I saw a woman collapse on the sidewalk. I called for help. Then someone saw me and assumed I had done something wrong. They did not ask. They did not listen. They did not believe me. He let the sentence breathe. I was thrown to the ground. Handcuffed. Humiliated. They called me a liar. Gasps rippled through the room, even though most already knew. But I was not a liar. I was a child, a helper, a believer in justice, and for a while, I did not want to believe in it anymore. He looked directly into the cameras. I wanted to stay home. I wanted to stay quiet. But then I remembered something my mom told me. Silence never saved a single soul. But truth has saved millions. He smiled. That is when I decided to speak again, not for me, for the kids who do not get cameras, who do not get hashtags, who get suspended for raising their hand too fast, who get followed in stores for wearing hoodies, who get judged for their names before they say a word. He turned to the children in the front rows. You matter. Your truth matters. You do not have to be perfect to be powerful. You do not have to be famous to be heard. Then his voice lowered. And to the people who did not believe me, I forgive you. There was a stunned silence. And in that pause, Jeremiah leaned in. Because forgiveness is not letting go of what happened. It is refusing to let what happened define you. Murmurs of emotion washed over the room, sniffles. Soft gasps, nods. See, I used to think justice came from courts or cops or presidents. But now I know it starts in kitchens. In classrooms. On sidewalks. In every place where a voice says, I believe you. And if we can all do that, if we can believe the Jeremiahs before they go viral, we won, just be a better nation. We will be a braver one. He took a breath, then delivered the final blow. My name is Jeremiah Carter, and I was believed too late. He looked into the lens. But tonight, I speak so the next child won't have to wait. The room erupted. Some stood, some wept openly. Even the president rose to his feet. No teleprompter, no rehearsed finish. Just a 13-year-old boy with a bruised past, a clear heart, and a truth that now belonged to the world. That night, news outlets did not call it a speech. They called it a turning point. Some called it a sermon without a pulpit. Others called it a child rewriting the moral compass of a country. But Carol Carter, watching from the front row with trembling hands and a proud heart, it was something much simpler. It was her son, standing, unafraid. And finally, heard, the morning after Jeremiah Carter's speech, America did not wake up the same. Something had shifted, not a law, not a headline, but a feeling. In neighborhoods where people once crossed the street when they saw a black boy in a hoodie, some paused and wondered, what is his name? What is his story? In classrooms across the country, teachers printed out Jeremiah's words and pinned them beside the Constitution. In churches, barbershops, diners, and police stations, people asked themselves, how many Jeremiahs did we silence before this one finally broke through? But Jeremiah did not know all of that yet. He was still in his pajamas, curled on the couch in his mother's arms, a bowl of cereal on the table going soggy beside him. He had turned down every interview that morning. Ken, Ubs, Good Morning America, Oprah, they all called. But Jeremiah had said the same thing to each of them. I just want to be a kid today. And so he was. His mom did not force him to get dressed. She did not answer her phone. She did not even look at the news. For a few hours, they sat together in peace, the kind that only comes after surviving a storm you were not sure you would live through. But peace does not last forever, not for change makers. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. When Carol opened it, she found a mail carrier holding a heavy envelope and a bouquet of yellow sunflowers, Jeremiah's favorite. For mirror. Jeremiah Carter, the man said, smiling. Signature required. Jeremiah signed, opened the envelope, and found something he never expected. A letter written in careful cursive, a presidential citation for civil courage, a scholarship to the university of his choice, and a small note handwritten at the bottom. If you ever want to run for office, I will be your first donor, Iwa. Jeremiah smiled. He did not say much. He just folded the letter and tucked it in the back of his comic book drawer. Not because he did not treasure it, but because he did not need to frame change to keep it alive. He was living it. In the weeks that followed, things did not magically fix themselves. There were still difficult conversations, still angry voices, still officers who looked the other way, still classrooms where students of color were treated as threats before they were seen as children. But now, they had a name, a face, a story. Jeremiah Carter had become more than a boy. He was a mirror. He started a foundation, the I Believe Project, dedicated to empowering kids who had been dismissed, misjudged, or silenced. It trained teachers, partnered with youth centers, and provided scholarships for students who had endured injustice with quiet dignity. The motto was simple: believe early, speak loud, heal always. But Jeremiah did not stop there. At 15, he was invited to speak at the United Nations. At 17, he testified before Congress about policing and youth justice. At 19, he published a memoir, Thrown Down. Standing Tall. It became a New York Times bestseller. But the most important thing he ever did came years later, when he was 25. He returned to Wakefield, Virginia. The town that had once turned its back on him now turned out in droves to see him. He was not there to campaign. Not yet. He was there to unveil something. In the center of town square, where the old courthouse once stood, they had built a new statue, not of a general, not of a politician, not of a president. It was a bronze sculpture of a boy standing tall, one hand outstretched, the other clutching a notebook. At the base were the words, "I told the truth, and now the truth is telling me what to do next." Jeremiah Carter. Age 13. The crowd fell silent as Jeremiah stepped up to the mic. "I am not here because I was the only kid this ever happened to," he said. "I am here because I was the one you could not ignore." He turned toward the young faces in the crowd. "And now, it is your turn to be heard." He stepped back. No applause yet, just awe. Stillness. Tears. And then, slowly, they rose. Mothers, fathers, teachers, kids, black, white, brown, together, because one boy had done what institutions failed to do for decades. He had made America stop, listen, and believe. Jeremiah Carter did not change the nation by being loud. He changed it by being true, and in doing so, he reminded the world of something it had nearly forgotten, that even the smallest voice, when filled with truth, can shake the highest walls, that even the youngest among us can become the authors of a better tomorrow. That justice does not start with power. It starts with a boy on a sidewalk, whispering, "I did not do anything wrong," and being believed. And that was the story of Jeremiah Carter, the boy who was thrown to the ground, called a liar, and still chose to stand tall with truth. In a world that often speaks louder than it listens, Jeremiah taught us something powerful, that justice is not just about laws or leaders. It is about how we treat one another when no one's watching. That believing someone, truly seeing them, can change not just a moment, but a nation. So, the next time you see a child speaking truth, a stranger asking for dignity, a voice that seems too small to matter, stop, listen, believe. Because sometimes the bravest people in the room are the ones still growing. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you reflect, do one small thing to keep it alive. Hit the like button to support stories that matter. Leave a comment and tell us, when was the last time someone believed in you? Share this video with someone who needs hope today. And do not forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life inspired stories every week, because one voice can spark a movement. And maybe the next voice will be yours. This is more than a story. It is a reminder to believe in truth, to believe in each other, and to never underestimate a child with something to say. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.